call the work session to order on Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021 at 5:15 p.m. This work session is regarding affordable housing in the city of Marquette. If you could please, well, actually, first we've got to do a Pledge of Allegiance. So we will stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Play ball.
All right, and as this is a work session, I will go ahead and just take a roll call here, but you know, since we're doing Zoom, City Clerk, could you do the roll call because we're on Zoom with the location? He's giving a thumbs up. Go ahead and do that, please, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. And again, the standard, you know, city and county for most people. Commissioner Bonzal?
Here in City of Marquette, County of Marquette.
Commissioner Davis?
President, City of Marquette, County of Marquette.
Commissioner Hanley?
Present, City of Marquette, County of Marquette.
Commissioner Mayer?
Present, unable to provide location due to military orders.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
City of Marquette and County of Marquette present.
Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
I am present in the City of Marquette, County of Marquette.
And Mayor Smith?
Present, City of Marquette, County of Marquette. Thank you, City Clerk. All in attendance. So tonight, this is a joint work session between the Marquette City Commission and the Ad Hoc Housing Committee. Do we also need to do a roll call of the Ad Hoc Housing Committee? Feedback.
I don't know that that's required. I don't have a roll in front of me, but Dennis might.
I'd be happy to do that if you want. Chairman Bonsall?
I'm here. City of Marquette, County of Marquette.
Very good. Dennis Smith? Stephanie Jones?
Here.
County of Marquette, City of Marquette?
Yep.
Mark Curran?
I see him on here.
Mark, I had to mute you.
Somehow,
Getting feedback.
you guys muted me. So present, City of Marquette, County of Marquette.
Great. Wayne Primo? No Wayne Primo. Jackie Stark?
Here. We're just saying we live in the city of Marquette, County of Marquette.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was.
And Bob Chapman? Not present. And I believe that's all of them. Oh, Antonio Aiden.
Present.
City and County?
Marquette City. Ad Hoc City Commission.
Okay, thanks, Antonio. All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't believe I missed
Thank you,
anyone.
appreciate it. I think it just helps us kind of put names to the faces for those of you that we haven't had the pleasure to meet. So the roll call was kind of a dual purpose there. So this committee was formed after quite a few discussions about housing affordability. So I'm getting some feedback, that's why I'm a little distracted, sorry. I think Sean's gonna help me with that. He's working on it. Okay, I'll just keep going and maybe we can get that fixed. So I'm sorry about the delay there. We have for a long time in the city of Marquette been dealing with some housing affordability issues for kind of the mid-range folks, maybe in the workforce or, you know, not necessarily low income and definitely not at the high end. Difficult to find and purchase a home in Marquette or to live in Marquette and rent a place. So things that we're kicking around, and we decided to form an ad hoc housing committee, which we just had the roll call taken, so you're able to get a good preview of who is on that committee and the good work that they've done. we're going to be discussing tonight. They have an initial report with some pretty interesting findings. And after tonight's discussion, it's my understanding that they have a few more months of meetings, maybe 4, 5, 6 more meetings, and then they will take our feedback from tonight and their further discussions and come up with a final report to present to the City Commission, at which point the city would then use to decide next steps, you know, whether that be part of our strategic plan or our community master plan, some probably conversations with the community and getting more feedback from the public. We always take feedback, but trying to engage maybe with surveys or public forum if COVID will allow it at that time. That's kind of what I'm thinking at this point, just to kind of give an introduction to what we're thinking about here. I'm certainly pleased with the results of the initial report. It was a very interesting read. I've had a few conversations over the last week about that report and the findings, and I'm looking forward to the work session tonight. So at this point, I will turn it over to the chairman of the ad hoc committee, Commissioner Evan Bonzel, and I believe he'll be working closely with his other committee members and with Dennis Stakowitz, who is the staff lead on this. So go ahead and take it away, Commissioner Bonzel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. I just want to make sure we did have a public comment period. Do we have anybody who is offering public comment?
I was rolling. That was my bad. Let's back up. We will go ahead and open public comment. Thank you, Commissioner Bonzel. And I know that we did have 5 written comments, so that was not intentional by any means. I will go ahead and open public comment now. And City Clerk, do you have those written comments that you could read for us, please?
I do have them. Yeah, you had, I thought I was getting out of a fair amount of reading there for a second. Yeah, so we do have five written comments, and just starting from the top, this first comment is from Alex Leto Clark at 920 West Bluff Street in Marquette. And Alex writes, I'm writing to voice my support for affordable housing in the city of Marquette. I thank the city commissioners who have put their hard work into the report, and I'm glad this is being addressed. As a 30-year-old with a master's degree, I make $12.69 an hour in a professional position. This, by Marquette standards, is good pay for a job. I do not want to rent for the rest of my life. The ad hoc housing report stated that the new homeowners are not interested in starter homes. What is your definition of starter homes? Would that be the 2 to 3 bedroom ranch style houses that are currently listed for over $150,000? It is not that we aren't interested in starter homes, it's that the pricing has gotten out of control. City Commission members need to think long and hard about who they're representing, especially the commissioners who own homes and do not have to deal with this housing market and stagnant wages. These are issues that affect a large population of the city. This will most likely be made worse by the pandemic in the coming months and years. Why are we giving tax breaks on the brownfield projects to out-of-town companies building more affordable housing? Why are we letting one company based in Marquette, Viridia, own so much of it? The commercial space in One Marquette Place is still empty, and what kind of revenue long-term is that bringing into the city? I understand these projects are right on the lakeshore, but they were also city-owned land. The city has control over what gets built there, and the state is incentivizing projects that go there. Why couldn't we look for something that actually benefits the people who live here instead of handing it out to already wealthy companies who are looking to make maximum profit? We could be using these areas as part of the solution. Marquette has been my home for a decade, but most of my friends have moved away because it is simply not sustainable to stay here, especially as the chance of home ownership dwindles. My wife and I are currently looking at buying, and we already know that it will be outside of the city. We simply can't afford these starter homes that we supposedly aren't interested in. It breaks our hearts that we've been priced out of our home city, but that's the reality. As city commissioners, you can help make Marquette a place that welcomes young families and professionals. You have the ability to make a difference. You have the responsibility to listen to your constituents. I believe that each commissioner wants what is best for this city. I believe that as the pandemic continues to show its long-term effects on the economy and the housing market, this city commission will put the people of the city first and continue to research ways to make Marquette a place where people can afford to live. And the second comment is from Ciora Hull at 2227 Wilkinson. And Ciora writes, I appreciate the opportunity to have my thoughts be heard about the importance of middle housing. I believe that our community has, like much of this country, an ever-widening chasm between the haves and have-nots. One of the ways to strengthen our community is to assure abundant housing opportunities for all. The lack of middle housing causes families to move from this area so that they might find affordable housing, and causes our community to lose valuable workforce and innovators on which our community is built. A community that strongly spans a full range of housing is a strong, healthy, and vibrant community. I fully support making missing middle housing in Marquette a top priority. And the third comment is from Jill Junes, writing from Elk River, Minnesota. And Jill writes, "My name is Jill and I'm from Minnesota. I started seriously hunting for housing in Marquette and the surrounding area in June of 2020. I held virtual appointments with apartment complexes, emailed rental managers, and sent messages of inquiry extensively within Facebook Marketplace, but had no luck whatsoever. I even traveled in person for a week this past autumn from Minnesota to personally find a place to live. I had no luck whatsoever. The apartments that did allow pets only allowed fully certified service animals. The pet rent was too expensive and/or the rent was too high. In November, I finally moved into the area only due to the fact that I found a regular person willing to rent their land and electricity temporarily. Living with my cats in a camper in the middle of a Michigan winter was not what I expected. I don't know where we'll end up next, but it will be impossible to find a company-owned, operated apartment with my fur family and budget. I'm determined to make Marquette my home, but I'll stay living tiny until we can create something better together. Thank you." And the next comment is from Margaret Brum at 404 East Magnetic in Marquette. And she writes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, City Commissioners, and members of the City of Marquette Ad Hoc Housing Committee. With respect to the joint work session, I'm disappointed in the work done to date by the Ad Hoc Housing Committee. The focus appears to be on existing solutions to creating more housing space, and those existing solutions ignore the realities of the snowfall, requiring that all streets in Marquette have to be empty of vehicles so the plows can clear the snow. I'm also disappointed that true innovation has not yet been looked at, such as creating small home parks, more mobile home parks, more contact with Habitat for Humanity, and more consideration of eco-friendly housing. These true innovation solutions can include features where electricity is mostly supplied by solar panels and there is a community garden and community laundry, and each small home has a parking space, so there doesn't have to be on-street parking. And the final comment is from Taylor Serrard at 118 West Arch. And Taylor writes, "To the Marquette City Commission and the Ad Hoc Housing Committee, I've lived in Marquette for 7 years. I'm active in this community as a worker, volunteer, and advocate. My housemate and I are both working professionals. Our last apartment was a 2-bedroom at $1,350 a month. It was the first apartment I rented in Marquette, which wasn't falling apart. When we moved in, I was working 2 jobs, about 44 hours per week, along with an online writing gig. I could have worked more, but my volunteer work with local organizations takes up the rest of my time. With all that, my rent was over that 30%, which should be spent on housing. After the pandemic, with unemployment and underemployment through December, my rent was becoming unaffordable. We were forced to move. I now live in an unfinished, unheated basement. I pay $350 a month. I live with 3 roommates, 2 cats, and 2 dogs. I am trying desperately to find new housing. I've been searching for something I could afford. With my new job in childcare, that would be about $450 a month if we were sticking with the 1/3 rule, but I'm willing to go up to the $500 range. I search 8 different sources daily: Trulia, Zillow, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and several groups on Facebook. I check other sources every so often just to be sure. The realty apps have no apartments in Marquette under $1,500. Craigslist is flooded with ads from a single developer. The Facebook groups are overwhelmed with ISO posts from people like me. I have found nothing. I have little hope I'll be able to move, and am anxiously awaiting the arrival of warmer weather when my space will be more livable. My story isn't dissimilar to other working professionals of Marquette. The people in my life who are nurses, teachers, managers, and childcare providers are living in a place they can't afford, a place that is in disrepair with too many people, or they were forced out of town by these conditions. Should working professionals still be living with multiple roommates in rundown college party houses, or should they be forced to commute every day to a town they never wanted to leave? For those who do stay, the high rent prices are preventing them from saving. If this same group of people were able to save up to own homes, they could make long-term investments here in Marquette. The community members teaching our children, building our resilience, providing our healthcare, and creating our culture cannot find reasonable housing. This needs to change. We need to do better for the people who are here now, not tourists, people looking for a second vacation home, or remote workers who want a new adventure. The people who grew up here, work here, contribute here, and make Marquette that someplace special. I implore you to do everything in your power to keep the people who care about Marquette in Marquette. Thank you." And those are all 5 written comments that I have.
Thank you, City Clerk. Do you have any written comments for the second period, just out of curiosity? We may have, am I on mute?
Nope, none of them stipulated which period, so I just read them all at the front. I have not received any.
Okay, we may have folks on Zoom that have comments for the second period. I just was checking in on the written piece.
I do have 2 in the waiting room.
Okay. Sure, we do have 2 in the waiting room, so public comment is still open. If we have anyone,
Mary Hole.
there's a Mary Hole. Let's see if we can get Mary connected here. Like she has disconnected, okay, and
Jill Ferrari.
Jill Ferrari. We're gonna let her in and see if she'd like to make a comment. Jill Ferrari, we see you on the call here. Would you like to make a public comment this evening?
Her audio is not.
Looks like the audio is not connected. Jill, if that's something you're interested in, you will have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. If you're having issues, if you can put something in the chat or do something to let us know. Okay, any additional public comment? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is now closed. And thank you again to Commissioner Bonzel for reminding me about public comment. I'm sorry that I had forgotten. We will move on to, we've got 2 items on our agenda here, the presentation, the QPAD housing assessment, and then our discussion for the ad hoc committee report and update on committee. And Commissioner Bonzel will go ahead and take it away.
Really looking forward to having some more discussion about housing in the city of Marquette and the committee's housing report. But first, I really thought that it would be helpful for the commission to hear from QPAD, our regional planning agency, because they recently completed a housing market assessment for all of Marquette County, but they also specifically focused in on the city and township of Marquette. And so I had asked them to provide a little bit of information to us. I think we have, Ryan Susi and Callie New on the phone or on Zoom with us here, rather. And I guess I would just turn it over to them to give us a brief presentation on some of their findings.
Thank you, Evan. And thank you, commissioners and ad hoc housing council. So we do have a presentation for you. Kelly's going to be flipping through the slides, and then I'm going to be leading it off here, and then we'll switch over to her.
Great. Let me just get in presenter mode.
Okay.
Can everyone see the screen? Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Ryan Susi. I'm a senior economic development and community development planner at QPAD, and I'm being joined by Kelly New, a local planning consultant. So if you're not familiar with QPAD, we are the 6 county regions regional planning and development organization. And as an RPO, we focus on planning and development issues affecting our 6 county regions. So housing is one of those. Ready to flip the slide? One of those key regional issues. It's important for talent attraction. It's important for quality of life, the ability to age in place, and for equity. And those are all issues that we care about as planners. So we worked on this housing study to analyze, and it includes an analysis of our demographics, our economic and social conditions, and also housing stock and how those are influencing housing issues and needs in the area. So it's our hope to guide policy and to inform you as you're making decisions. How we got to this point, back in 2019, we were given funding through Governor Snyder's Regional Prosperity Initiative to focus on issues of regional importance. And it was through the Regional Prosperity Initiative that we got funding for this. So a group of county economic developers, workforce development professionals, community developers, higher education, all got together and said, housing is really a key issue that touches us all. And we hope to try to understand the situation more and make an impact on that. So we came together over this idea of creating a housing needs assessment for various counties in the region. Through the study, we also engaged in focus groups, and we tried to get a broad cross section of stakeholders involved in housing. So we invited county and city staff, economic development organizations, community development, developers, lenders, landlords, large employers, and in all we had 2 meetings focusing. Our first meeting was in the Negaunee-Ishpeming area, looking at their focus area, and second went to the city of Marquette, and actually I think we did it over Zoom. And we got a lot of good participation among the groups. So here I'm showing you what our focus areas were. We looked at the county on the whole, but we also looked at the census tracts around Negaunee-Ishpeming and the city of Marquette to really focus on those housing markets and the unique issues that were going on there, because they're a little bit different in each area. So to start out, I'm going to tell you what the takeaways were from our study. And I hope you get a chance to dig into it when you get the opportunity. But those high-level issues that we saw coming out of it, number one, the cost of housing is rising faster than incomes are rising. You know, inflation's going up, the cost of everything is going up, healthcare and the cost of education, the cost of childcare. Lots of things are going up, and wages are really kind of stagnant, rising slowly. Number two, the home sale prices in Marquette are quite a bit higher than the surrounding area. People are willing to pay a premium for the amenities that Marquette has. It's a walkable community. It has a lot of nearby attractions that people are looking for, but it's growing unaffordable. Housing affordability challenges, particularly for those people at lower income levels, are finding difficulty in finding housing, and especially we see this especially because the pandemic lately too is really impacting it a lot. A lot of what we see affected are service occupations, and particularly women that are working in a lot of those positions. Experiencing brain drain or loss of NMU graduates upon graduation. Marquette is a university community, and we have quite a few, but as soon as they graduate, we see a large amount of them leaving, and we want to be able to capture that talent more. And at the regional level, we're trying to grow the population of the Upper Peninsula. We see it declining, and we think it's key demographics like this that can help us grow our population and increase incomes in the region. Retirees, our population the average age of our population is getting older, particularly because the baby boomer generation is aging into retirement now. And that population is going to grow older, so that has implications for housing and what their needs are. And finally, missing middle. You know, after World War II, we built a whole lot of single-family housing, and it really met our needs then. But now, you know, there's a lot more people that are living alone. Family sizes are, the average family size is reducing. And so, you know, we have other needs and not a whole lot of housing that meets that missing middle. And, Marquette is a really walkable community, and we already have that going for us, but some more opportunity to make that happen would be great. So I'm thinking things like duplexes and townhomes and live work spaces. Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, Ryan, thanks for that great summary. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about all of these takeaways just to show you some data snapshots that we were able to gather through our effort. So looking at median household incomes, this graph shows Marquette County in comparison to the surrounding central UP counties. So Marquette is shown here in the yellow bar, and then Delta, Dickinson, Menominee, and Schoolcraft are shown below. The state of Michigan is shown here in the dark blue color, and then the US is shown up top. So this kind of puts Marquette in a context, and we see that median household incomes are highest in Marquette among the UP communities or counties, slightly lower than Michigan and the US. Looking specifically at Marquette County from the year 2000 to 2017, we see that incomes have risen by about 36%. However, when we put that in context with inflation, looking back to the year 2000, we see that that's actually been a decline of about 4%. If we were just to look at inflation from the year 2000, incomes would have been $50,532. So not quite keeping up with inflation with the rise in median household incomes within the county. So keep that number in mind as we look at the housing price index. So this housing price index is put forth by the Federal Housing Agency, and it looks at sale prices of single family homes over time, the change in sale prices over time. So the housing price index in Marquette County has risen by 68% within that same time period, which is almost 2 times faster than median household incomes. In an ideal world, those two would kind of keep pace with each other for affordability reasons. It does have some advantages with existing homeowners having equity in their homes. If I owned a home, I would be happy to see this, but it creates a barrier for those who maybe live here and don't yet own a home and haven't seen the rise in income that's comparable to the increase in housing prices. And we see that this is consistent with national trends. This graph shows several different costs here in these various red shades in comparison to median incomes within the country. So we see that median incomes have risen pretty modestly between the year 1995 and 2017. And then healthcare costs, housing costs, and education costs have risen much more dramatically, despite having the big drop off in housing costs with the economic recession. And we also see that household costs are taking up a bigger chunk of household budgets, rising from 23% of household expenditures in the beginning of the 19th century and rising to nearly 33% in 2018. So as housing is taking up a bigger chunk of household budgets, so is education and healthcare costs, leaving much less money for necessary goods and services. And this slide shows a household survival budget. So this is put forth by United Way, and it's looking specifically at Marquette, what typical costs are for a family. So a single adult family or household is shown here on the left, and that's compared to a family with 2 adults, 1 infant, and 1 preschooler. So if you look down here at the annual total, this is a typical needs-based household budget, what one would need in order to survive within the county, given housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, technology, taxes. So $20,000 for a single adult and about $65,000 for a family of 4. Okay, takeaway number 2, Brian mentioned that the Marquette average home sale prices are about $100,000 more than the surrounding areas. So we looked at data from realtor.com. So kind of approaching it as one might if they were searching for a home, just an average person looking to buy a home. So this data was pulled in November of 2020. So it's kind of just a snapshot in time over the last couple of months. So Marquette is shown in this sort of charcoal color, Ishpeming in this green color, and then Negaunee in the gray. So this is the number of homes by sale price. And we see that Marquette doesn't have any homes for sale less than 50,000, a few under 100,000, about 10 under 150,000, and then with the majority of homes being sold between $150,000 and $500,000. And then you compare that to Ishpeming, which has several homes available under 50,000, many under 100,000, and then it kind of tapers off from there. Negaunee has sort of a bell curve shape. In comparison, up here we see the average list price. In November of 2020, the average list price in Marquette was $314,000, which is over $150,000 more than Ishpeming and about $125,000 more than Negaunee. And then looking at housing affordability challenges for renters at the lower income levels. So this graph shows the comparison of renters up on top to owners, and AMFI stands for Area Median Family Income. So this is looking at people who are earning under the area median income are all in these brackets here. And then people who are earning equivalent to or more than area median income in this fifth bar here. So we see that renters are disproportionately represented on the lower income brackets, according to this 2017 American Community Survey data. So of those that are earning 30% of area median income, so the bar on the furthest left of that previous slide, over half of them, about 53% of those renters, or almost 1,000 households, are paying more than 50% of their income on housing. And so this graph is showing, again, a snapshot in time from November of 2020 using Craigslist data and Realtor.com data, looking at median asking rents for homes by type. And we found that regardless of household type, whether it was a single family home, a duplex, or an apartment, median asking rents were over $1,000 at the time of this data collection effort in November.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Of course.
The duplex, was that for the entire household or was that per unit?
Per unit.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Antonio may have had a question too, and now may be a good time since we already stopped. Thank you.
Sure.
Antonio?
Yes, I think Evan answered my question. If it's true that on that slide for November 2020 data on the groups of types of homes, I was wondering if that included multi, single, duplex, or what was the origin of the house, the owner occupied homes?
It was all housing types.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And then this graph is sourced from the New York Times. It was a recent article looking at the impact of the pandemic on various portions of the economy. So this is looking just from January of 2019. This is nationwide, but looking at the home price index, which was shown on that first one of the first graphs that we showed, that home price index has risen by 11% and rents have risen by 5.6% just in the past. This was just from January to October. So definitely the pandemic is definitely having an impact on housing and rental prices, and might be expected to continue in the future.
Kelly, can I ask a question briefly?
Of course, yeah.
I think this was something that, one or two other commissioners were curious about as well. Just to clarify, are we, I believe, most of this presentation so far, we're using Marquette County-wide data, correct?
It depends on the graph or
Sure.
the data. I can share, I can go through the graph if you want, or kind of send some follow-up materials if that would be easier to specify what the unit of analysis was.
Yeah, I think if you can just try and like be clear about when we're talking about the county as a whole, when we're talking about Marquette specifically, that would be helpful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that the snapshots, the housing prices and the rent prices, those are all Marquette specific.
Sorry, when you said Marquette specific, I think you meant city specific?
City specific, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Not to confuse even more. The median household incomes and the housing index are both Marquette County data.
If you don't mind, if you could just take a second and quickly go back through the last slides and just say what was what. I think, just make sure that we're all on the same page here. I think it would help. Thank you. I appreciate it, Callie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of these are clearly labeled, but some of them, I think they were a little bit more difficult to decipher that.
Unfortunately, my data source is right here and it's underneath this bar. So that would have helped too. But so this is Marquette County median household income. This is also Marquette County. Marquette County. Marquette County. It's a national. This is Marquette County. This is broken up by Marquette, Ishpeming, and Negaunee.
So is that city of Marquette?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
This is county data, renters versus owners. This is also county data. This is city-specific data. And this is national.
Okay, and if you could just do that on each slide as you go forward, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually going to turn it back over to Ryan. And Ryan, I'm here to chime in on the unit, if it's a city or county data, as you need.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so I mentioned this issue of brain drain. And so we have a whole lot of students that are coming here for NMU. We're very thankful for that. And student housing, you have a lot of students in student housing in the 20 to 24 age range, usually for undergrad. Kelly, could you go to the next slide, please? So we have a population pyramid here, and I think this one uses the county. Yep. But the city population pyramid, I don't know if we have it in the report as well, but it resembles this almost exactly, except it's a little bit more, it's a lot more pronounced here at the 20 to 24 age range. That sticks out a lot more. Also out in the county, you see a lot more of these baby boomers up here in the years up here. So I want you to kind of remember this graph and what the shape of it is, because when I'm going to be moving over to talking about retirement age people in just a minute. But the issue, if we're looking at talent attraction and trying to capture these, we see about a 1,700 difference between when this age cohort leaves the city. So it would be really nice if we could somehow capture this population. They're really looking for starter homes and, affordable living. They're graduating with student debt often, and when you have a high debt to income ratio, it makes it difficult to be able to afford a mortgage on your home. So a lot of them become renters until they can afford it. And with rent being excessively high, then it's always a challenge to save up for that down payment. So next slide, please. Speaking about retirees, they comprise 1/3 of the current homeowners, and it's expected to grow over time. So think about that graph that I showed you, and imagine it. That was 2017 data. Imagine it, 4 years later, a lot of those baby boomers are already aging past retirement now. And so, they're empty nesters often and looking to downsize, have less, responsibility for shoveling and mowing the lawn, and looking to do less of that, physical work as they get older, and thinking about the future, about when they might have less mobility, and stairs and second stories are often an issue. So we got to think about housing stock that can accommodate aging in place. So we're going to see this light pink part of our pie chart here start to increase over time, I think. And this larger light purple one here slowly start to decrease. Next one.
And just to clarify, that graph there, that's combined City of Marquette and Marquette Township data, correct?
That is correct. Yep. Thank you. Lastly, this opportunities for missing middle, and I think you guys have been discussing this. I know it's part of the redevelopment ready communities, and having more possibilities for missing middle housing. So I'm thinking things like live work units and duplexes and fourplexes, condominiums, townhomes, things like that. And in locations where they're walkable and have the ability to reduce sprawl. Transit-oriented options are always really great. If you can live in a place where you don't have to have a car, that's kind of what a lot of people are looking for. And so any opportunity where you can encourage that more is a really great thing. And so there's people are already paying a premium for where they want to live here. So any possibility that you can increase that is good. Thank you. And I think that takes us to the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them between Kelly and I, or if you'd like to dig into that report a little bit more and ask us questions later, we're always open for that.
Yeah, thank
Do
you,
we have
Ryan,
anyone that
Kelly.
has
That's
a question now?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
All right, I'll let, we do have questions. Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
Thank you.
You're
Thanks
on
for your hard work and pulling all this together. Greatly appreciated. One thing that jumped out at me in the report that was put up on the web is that since 2000, the increase in housing prices in Marquette County was the highest of all of Michigan's counties. That's kind of terrifying, actually. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. So that was the second graph that I showed that was comparing the median household incomes with the housing price index. So the housing price index is looking at the change in sale price. So if I live in a home today, what did it sell for when I bought it? And then what do I sell it for now? That's what the housing price index is measuring, the change in sale price from owner to owner. So it's not representative necessarily of every single home on the market because it tracks sales over time. But it is looking all the way back from, I believe, 1991. So any house that's been sold between 1991 and now should be tracked in that home sale price. And yes, that's correct, that in comparing the counties in Marquette with that specific data source, Marquette was the highest among all of the counties.
And I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Hauser, do you have any other questions? Thank you, Callie. Great explanation.
Not
I'm
right
just
now.
looking ahead at who else has questions. Okay,
Sure.
I see Stephanie Jones has her hand raised, and I think that's it, and we'll go back to the regularly scheduled presentation here.
I just want to say, when you're using, one of the numbers that we tend to not use in the real estate community is average, because although, you know, you can sell $1 million home or $800,000 home and it'll skew your averages, what we tend to look at more is the median price, which is the absolute middle price of all the homes that have sold. And as last year, the median price was much lower than 310 or whatever the average showed. There are no like $10,000 houses that are being sold to counterbalance the 800,000. So when you look at average, it does skew those numbers a lot. Just wanted that out there. Tons of other things I can say, but that I thought was the most important, just to remind people that averages have some limitations.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Appreciate it. All right, I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Bonzoff to talk about this ad hoc committee report and the update from the committee. Thank you, Commissioner Bonzoff. And thank you to QPAD for that presentation. I'm sure we'll circle back with questions afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ryan and Kelly, for your great presentation. That information was all taken into consideration and viewed by the Ad Hoc Housing Committee, and much of it was incorporated into our report, kind of helped us generate some of our recommendations. So it was really fortunate that they were doing that work at the same time we were doing our work. Getting into the actual Ad Hoc Housing Committee report, I guess I would be happy to turn it over to Dennis Stakowitz, who is our staff liaison, and of course our Director of Community Development here in Marquette. And I think you know, he can provide a presentation or a brief overview of the contents of the report and some of the recommendations, and then maybe we can just get into more of a Q&A and sort of open discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, and all the attendees of the meeting. I know that everyone has been provided with the report, and I was the staff liaison for the committee that helped the committee through actually a very trying meeting time. The committee was formed, and I think less than 11 days after its formation, we were hit with the initial COVID, and then we couldn't meet until late spring, almost summertime. Might have even been like August. So we lost quite a few months in there, but it was a very, very good discussion at the committee level. You know, as a brief overview of that report, you know, just the whole concept of the committee, you know, they're dealing with very delicate issues here. Very polarizing issue, and I think the committee did a good job of understanding. Look, you know, at one point in time in the city of Marquette, I believe we have, you know, like 50% of our land that is not taxable. And because of that, with losing We Energies and the tax income from that, you have a residential component of land value that, you know, the city relies on quite a bit of income for their tax base. And because of that, you have this delicate balance back and forth of, well, you know, high values are good because we get tax income off that, but yet we're also pricing people out. And, you know, that with such a delicate issue, you couldn't have put together a better committee to discuss those items. And, you know, we met, I want to say we met at least probably 8 to 10 times. And at each meeting, there was a specific focus on picking apart a certain aspect of affordable housing in the community, what we are currently doing through things such as our zoning, land development code ordinance, what perhaps other communities are doing, what the national trends are. They also looked a little bit at lower income housing. We had representation on the committee to look at that. We had, the group had many specialists come and make presentations. We had Dan Pellerich, who is the father of Missing Movement, come and give a presentation and actually presented some examples in Marquette that currently would fit into that missing middle housing. We reached out to various staff members. Dave Stensis, who is our zoning administrator and city planner, came and spoke about the many amendments that are ongoing with the land development code and how they address affordable housing. And I had spoken about the interrelationship with the community master plan and achieving some of those goals. And we even brought in local developers to speak about what they see as some of the challenges with whether it's a government permitting issue at the local, state, or higher level, and also developers from outside of the community that have been involved with affordable housing projects, to kind of look at all of these issues, pick them apart, put them back together. And then the report, as it was put together, I think the report was intended to be conveyed by the committee as not a be all end all, but rather these are the big items that we looked at that we would like to look at a little bit further and further massage them, for lack of a better term, because they are potentially hot topic issues that are going to need a very robust community process to work through. Some of those that you'll read in there would be, a big one that came up at the staff level was the winter on-street parking. Can we get rid of the winter parking ban, and can we look at alternate side street parking? That takes an entire staff exercise and community meetings to be able to pull something like that off to make that work. So just that, because it's seen in the report, I'd like to say from an administration standpoint, that doesn't mean that we can actually move forth and implement it tomorrow. You need, each one of those recommendations need to have a fairly robust process behind them. So that's really all I have. Speaking to the report itself and the committee, again, I think the commission pointed a very well-rounded group to be on the committee. They had very robust discussion, and they put together some topics that I believe are going to lead to some additional questions tonight. And hopefully moving forward with the length of time on the committee, my staff and I could be able to assist them with further massaging some of their recommendations.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Boswell. I wasn't sure if you wanted to take it back over.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to note, of course, this is a pretty lengthy report, and it's almost 100 pages long, but especially for members of the public who might be interested in viewing this, the meat of the report, some of the key background information and data that we included, as well as some summary of, some of the discussions we had in our meetings. And then of course, ultimately our set of recommendations to the city of Marquette. Those are all included in the first 10 pages of the report. And that's including the two kind of title and like credit pages. So, I mean, it's definitely very readable. Of course, would encourage everyone to, carefully look through the appendices, but I think that anybody can get a good sense of the direction we'd like to move just by looking at those first 10 pages. I also just wanted to note one particular thing before we kind of just open it up for just open discussion and questions, Madam Mayor. But I just wanted to clarify that, much of this report focuses on the need to create more, missing middle housing in Marquette. And we do provide a definition of missing middle housing in the report, It's the same definition that Dan Paralek, the person who coined the phrase, came up with. And that's just a range of house scale buildings with multiple units compatible in scale and form with detached single family homes that are located in a walkable neighborhood. And I would add to that, and our committee sort of added to that, also smaller, more affordable single family homes. And generally, and as Mr. Paralek noted in his presentation to us, generally missing middle housing will also fall into a more mid-range, kind of like workforce, what we define as workforce housing price range of somewhere between affordable for households earning somewhere between 80% and about 120% of the area median income, which in the city of Marquette is about $40,000 a year. And in future reports, I do think that there's an intention to be more specific about price points and price ranges and things like that. You could kind of independently calculate some of those things out on your own if you were determined enough to do that, but we definitely intend to provide a little bit more specific information about that in the final report, I think. And the last thing I would say that I just want to mention before we open it up is that, the reason that we use the term missing middle housing, I think you can see from that definition from Mr. Paralek that, other terms that have been thrown around or that are mentioned throughout the report, like density, multifamily housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, low-income housing, et cetera, none of those terms really accurately describe what missing middle housing is. We're using the term missing middle housing throughout much of the report to try to accurately describe the pretty wide range of housing forms and housing price points that we think we need more of in Marquette. We're not trying to mislead anybody or misrepresent anything or play politics by saying missing middle housing. We're trying to accurately describe the kind of housing that we think we need to create more of in Marquette. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, and that's discussed in our recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonzel. So if I could, I'd just like to kind of refocus on the why for a second. So why are we doing this? I know most people get it. I mean, you could hear in the comments tonight, and some of those were kind of even surprising to me, even though I know those things happen. I would like to reach out to some of these residents and thank you to all 5 folks who did present public comment, but there are much more stories like that in Marquette. And in my mind, workforce housing, middle housing, missing middle housing, it's really to make sure that our critical community workers and emergency responders, so folks like police, firefighters, nurses, teachers, can live in the community that they work in, that they have that opportunity. Does that mean every teacher, every firefighter has that opportunity? Probably not. But I think creating more opportunities and doing what we can through policy discussions to make that easier is probably some of what we're looking at here. So, I think most of us get the why, but I just wanted to kind of state that in case some folks maybe are watching from home and they're still trying to figure out why we are meeting tonight. I think it might be good for us to focus on the recommendations in this report and talk about those, because I think when it comes down to it, this committee is going to go back and meet and talk about whether these recommendations remain the same or are tweaked or added to, or those are going to be the meat of what happens at the end of this ad hoc committee's tenure. So I think that would be a good thing to focus on. I believe there are 2 recommendations, but the second recommendation has several items underneath it. So I'm thinking maybe we address number 1 first, and then allow for some comments and discussion, and then number 2 broadly, and try not to get too bogged down in the details on some of the sub items, but I think that would be a good start. I'm hoping Dennis, like he mentioned, could potentially pull that up so we can look at together the recommendations. And in my conversation with Commissioner Bonzel a couple of days ago, I'm of the understanding that these are in no specific order. The order they're in does not mean one is a higher priority than the other. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's correct. The order of these recommendations really doesn't mean anything. And I would actually be happy to, before we take questions, say on, section 1 of the recommendation, section 2, to kind of go through each of the little items under each one of those briefly, maybe answer some questions before they're even asked. If you
want to frame it up, either you or Dennis or both of you, maybe tag team, give us a little bit more detail, especially on these recommendations. I think that would be a good way to go. And then I will open it up and give each commissioner a chance for comments or questions. And I know we've got the committee, the ad hoc committee here, and QPAD here with anything that they can add to those comments or questions as they come up. Does that sound pretty good? Kind of a little bit harder to do a work session on Zoom, so especially with all these players. Yeah,
that works for me if it
Okay.
works for you, Dennis. So I think that just briefly before we kind of dive into the very first recommendation here, I want to reiterate that these recommendations are, ideas. And the nature of our committee is that, we were tasked with coming up with some potential solutions. So I think that, with any number of these, I'm sure you could go through and kind of provide a lot of constructive feedback, which I hope we get tonight, and maybe poke some holes in some things. And that's great, because that'll help us strengthen these recommendations and make sure they make sense. And as Dennis noted, any of these recommendations are going to require significant, public feedback, public input, consultation with various stakeholders and elements of the city government, some more than others, right, in order to implement. So the first recommendation is to define the city role in affordable/missing middle housing. Committee feels that high-level discussion is warranted regarding the city having a stake in the development process through some form of participation. Such a role could include providing special financing, land, or other incentives such as density bonuses. So all this is saying is that the city should be taking a more active role. That sure, there are things we can do with zoning, there are some things we can do with regulations and red tape and partnerships that we could potentially form with other governmental or non-governmental entities, but the city should be doing what it can, unilaterally and in partnership with other entities in the community in order to try and promote missing middle housing development and housing affordability. And that could take a very wide form of things. But to be clear, what we're not saying here is that the city of Marquette should be building, owning, and operating like a low-income housing complex or something. So I just wanted to be clear that that's not what this recommendation means, in case anybody initially thought that's what it meant. But I don't know if there are any questions or thoughts about this recommendation.
Yeah, so some of the questions I had about this, you've answered, which is very helpful. Thank you, Commissioner Bonzel. I read this as maybe us becoming developers, and that is not the intent. Is that correct? I mean, that would not be the recommendation as it stands now. It's more to take a more active role in the planning for either city-owned or maybe other vacant property within the city of Marquette.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis, feel free to jump in if you.
Yeah, I'd be glad to jump in on that. First and foremost, I was pretty confident in letting the committee know that I wasn't interested in creating a City of Marquette housing department under community development. That's kind of half jokingly and half serious when you look at our bandwidth for what we have to do here. But, when we talk about defining the role in affordable and missing middle housing, you go back to the master plan, like you said, Madam Mayor, it's important to the community. You've had people call in, we'd like to be able to address this. So we list a few things in there. As Commissioner Bonshall said, what this really is here is, let's have a higher level discussion as we move forward about what are the things that perhaps the low-hanging fruit that the city can do that doesn't have an unbearable burden on the taxpayer itself to maybe create some more housing opportunities or partnerships. Whether that's doing, requests for qualifications or proposals for any city land that we have available, that we might be able to partner with developers that are able to do that type of missing middle housing, or whether it is, do we need to go in and have the Planning Commission look at some of the zoning, and do we want to maybe trade off, an additional story or two in height for additional increased density in a development, and those things which become further community processes. But rather than being reactive to those when somebody comes to us, it would be the high level discussion of where perhaps the City Commission and Planning Commission and others could actually take a look at it and come up with a strategy to say, these are the low hanging fruit things that we're going to go after, and kind of take a leadership role in that.
I also think
Thank you,
that,
Dennis. And sorry.
this is Stephanie. I also think that we were very cognizant that the city cannot magically make housing appear, and the city shouldn't be getting into that development role, but should be facilitating more development to the best of their ability.
And I might add, I think, a good part of the discussion was predicated on the fact that I think the entire committee pretty much agreed that, government can get it could be a pretty hard position for the city of Marquette to possibly get into the role of providing that housing. And then how do you pick out who wins and who loses when doing that? And the committee was very cognizant that's not a role that they wanted to be in.
Your Honor, I think if those were having this long discussion, we ought to drop the page up on the screen and allow all commissioners to participate.
I'm working on that, Commissioner Stonehouse.
Thank you.
I can stop the share.
Okay, let's go into some discussion about this first recommendation. And I was just looking here. I think I will go with if Commissioner Davis, if you have anything, and we'll go alphabetical from there.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. In terms of the role, first of all, let me tell you that I really like the makeup of this committee, and I appreciate the variety of expertise. So thank you to all of you committee members for your time and your talent. And those of you who participated in the public comment, wow, I think you put a real human factor into what we're trying to accomplish here, and it brought it home to a lot of us. So thank you for doing that. In terms of the city role, I was struck by Mayor Pro Tem Hill sent us an article today, and it was also in the paper, about the kinds of things that Iron Mountain and Houghton and Munising are doing. And I think if we, as you go forward, collecting more of those examples of what cities have done will help us to determine. But above anything else, I feel that our role as a commission is to be good stewards of the people's money. And part of that is to make sure that we are really focused on what we're trying to do. I would like to, as you look at your next report, see a real concise statement of need and what the problem is, and then some goals and very specific objectives. If we can provide metrics on what we are trying to accomplish, I think that that will help the community understand where we are in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, because this certainly isn't something that, as Stephanie says, is not going to get fixed in next year. So that to me is one of the big things. Is there a way to measure the kinds of things that we want to accomplish, not the individual actions, but overall objectives of what we want to be. So, and I will just end there.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. I think that's some good feedback, and I'm guessing we'll take that into consideration. I really like your questions there. How about Commissioner Hanley?
Thank you. I also want to thank the committee for this report. You guys put so much work into it, and you went and you looked at it from all different angles, and I really appreciate it. And reading it really opens me up to seeing a lot of things that I didn't even notice about the city before this. Now, one of the questions that I have about the city's role in this is we're becoming pretty landlocked when it comes to area that we have for actual building and things like that. Did you guys identify any sites or things that we would have for possible sites that we could do this or lease things out or for this special financing? Did you have any of those in mind?
I could actually answer that because that kind of falls more on the administrative side of things. We do maintain a municipal property inventory, and that's maintained in the planning department. We have a number of sites identified in there that are not being used for municipal use for infrastructures, utility or drainage along those lines. And, you know, if it were at the desire of the commission, we could use that inventory to further identify properties that could be potentially developed for residential in form of partnership.
Awesome, thank you. Other than that, on this exact one, I don't have a whole lot more questions on this specific recommendation.
Great, thank you. How about Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again, the committee. A lot of time, a lot of good work. So staying, and I appreciate the conversation, staying focused on the recommendations. I think what I'm hearing is in taking what was presented to us about our current demographics, our current housing stock, and our prices and situation, it seems like one of the questions that would maybe help is, are we seeking to create housing that matches the population we have now, or the population we're going to have 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? And if we knew the answer, I think obviously we want to plan for the future, but to set that up, that like it was said, you know, we have a lot of housing that was built for family sizes in an economy that doesn't exist anymore. And that the economy and the family sizes that are coming at us, seniors who want to be in smaller living spaces where they don't have to shovel and they don't have to do all the maintenance. I heard that loud and clear. I heard loud and clear that younger folks also, given the prices that we have, are not going to be able to purchase the stock we have that is the large Victorian, you know, that was built in the 1800s for families and servants that don't exist anymore. So I think I would, so being clear, that metric question, I really appreciated Commissioner Davis bringing that up. And I think so identifying not just what our current population shape is, but what we see it coming to be, and what that set of people will need. If we're going to have 25% of our population wants to be in a home where they're not having to do yard work, so maybe that would, to me, sounds like a condo or something, you know, something like a condo, like that level of specificity. So I guess that's not really exactly city role, but I'm just, the data that would help us understand what we're getting to is the comment that I'm making there. And then I also have one other overall question, if I may, right now. Given the fact that Marquette County had the highest increase in prices for the whole state of Michigan, to me, that means that we probably started lower and then we've caught up with everybody else. And if that's the case, again, do we have the economy, the income that could help people be able to then afford to live here? So, and to me, that would help me understand again what we were trying to aim for. Does that make sense?
It does, but I want to point out that those numbers are skewed by averages. As we get more expensive homes that have sold, that's going to be a big part of that shift. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and but it gets to the availability though, right? I mean that's what it kind of also indicates. We still we have a missing middle problem. All there is for sale is this stuff that the critical workers can't afford. I mean, I hear you, but it's just kind of coming at it in another way, so that to me.
I want to highlight one problem is we don't have a lot of the huge post-World War II homes that many large communities have. And that home is one of the more affordable homes in Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo and some other areas. And that wasn't a huge build out at our time. So it's very hard for us now to play catch up and create a more attainable home when we didn't have that to begin with. So the inventory that we're missing was never built 60, 80 years ago, and we cannot replicate that now. It is impossible to build $150,000 houses.
Right.
And Mark has been so good for us to have on the committee to really show what the building parameters are that we can't change.
Right. Right. But that's really helpful to me. I think that's really important for people to understand about why we're in this squeeze.
But we're not, it's not just here. Even places that have that, there are very few places in the country except California, because everyone's leaving there, that isn't in a housing squeeze.
Well, right. I mean, and as some folks here have heard, I grew up in the Midwest, went to the East Coast. I couldn't afford the East Coast in 2005 with my student debt, 15 years ago. And I left to come back to the Midwest because it was supposedly affordable. And I couldn't afford to buy the house that I own now. It would be impossible. So this is my life. Gen X. This is exactly Gen X. This is the situation that we're in. And luckily my student debt meant that I didn't get bankrupted by the housing crisis of 2009, like a lot of my family and friends. So yeah, we've got a lot of problems with housing in our country nationally. So on the role of the city, I think that I want to endorse the idea that the city facilitates. Someone said, facilitating to the best of the ability how we get to the metrics that we're going to identify. And I think the housing committee can recommend some metrics to us, but in the end, the commission will be the group that makes those recommendations about where we're aiming for. And if I have one last one other general question that seems really important to me is that 48% of the housing units in the city of Marquette are rentals, which is, I've seen no other metric that's anywhere close to that, where it's 50% owned and 50% rental. And so can we find, use a housing word, comparables of other communities that are also 50% rentals so that we can see, is there anything to be learned from that? I doubt that we're the only one in that situation, particularly a college town. And is there somewhere like that?
The other part of the equation, and I think there's two pieces to that rental metric, and to me it breaks down in two different ways. One is the what's considered commercial, so 5 units and above, because we have the preponderance of large scale housing for seniors, for assisted living, subsidized housing. All of those housings for the county tend to be in Marquette. So those large scale developments are there. And that's a different metric than the 4 and under, which is considered residential.
So so you're saying that the 48%, we should not be using that.
Well, it encapsulates both of them, but I do think there's a difference in those two types of rentals.
It would be really helpful to understand what those two numbers are.
Yeah, I agree.
I hear you. Yeah. So that would be another piece of information to uncover. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. How about Commissioner Mayer?
Alrighty. I also would like to thank the committee and all of you for putting in all this work, and Commissioner Bonsall for your leadership in getting us to this point. You know, the public comments and even the report, I noticed some in the report just seems staggering in a way, or shocking. To me, it's kind of what I already assumed. When, you know, my wife and I, for example, we are considered middle income from Marquette. We have a conversation probably every week about, you know, I'm on the commission, but I can't realistically afford a home in Marquette without being what we call house broke, meaning our finances monthly are strapped because of housing. You know, about 3 years ago, back when we actually were still allowed to gather in homes, I was at a friend's house and there was about 8 of us there, and all of us were originally from Sault Ste. Marie, which is where I grew up. And out of that original 8, excluding my wife and I, there's only 1 of them that's still in Marquette. The rest went downstate because they all originally came here for opportunity that they thought Marquette had, and they couldn't afford to live here long term. And it was more affordable to move to a place like Grand Rapids and live there. Several of them actually went to Grand Rapids. A couple went to places like Detroit, one to Traverse City. But so I understand this problem. You know, I'm 23 years old, living in Marquette. As far as like that age bracket goes, I'm living that part of the statistic. You know, it's a problem to me. On a symbolic standpoint, I know for a fact that at least half of the members on the commission right now can't realistically afford a house in Marquette. And that's like, on a symbolic scale, that's kind of a problem.
I just,
on this specific point, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to state, I think one of the things that conflates the problem, because I do have a whole lot of clients that are under 30 who've bought houses in Marquette. So, you know, I bristle when I hear that, and you may have to be a little, I don't know. Anyway, but I think there's 2 aspects to it. And one we have a little bit of control of, and one we have absolutely no control over. And that is the medium wage versus housing costs. So I would wonder if all of the people that left Marquette in your group are making the same money that they made here when they left. So I think it's a 2-pronged issue, and all of the fixes to housing in the world won't solve the other problem. Does that make sense?
Sure. You know, I've actually asked some of them these kinds of questions. My education background is very heavy in economics, so I really like data and just kind of mulling stuff like that over. Proportionately, the income to the housing price between the two, the jobs on like a percentage basis that they got in these other places were paying much more compared to their housing. So they were making much more, and they were paying for cheaper housing than what we had. So their economic system in these places that they moved to just all around was working better for them. You know, it's strange to a degree, because growing up in the Soo, like I was talking about, I can go to the Soo and get a house that if it was in Marquette, it would, not even exaggerating, be half the price if it was the identical house.
But that happens everywhere. The Detroit suburbs, you can be in one suburb in the exact same house, 2 suburbs over is $200,000 more. I mean, that happens everywhere.
Right, but I'm not comparing Marquette to Detroit. I'm comparing one UP city to the largest UP city to the second largest UP city. It's the most comparable thing I can use. Detroit, I mean, Detroit's had a long history of a lot of complicated things going on with that. You know, Detroit also makes up 50% of Michigan's GDP. So it's what I was going to say though is on this specific agenda item, I don't think there's a whole lot I would say for, I believe we're still on one. For this,
yep, we're still on the first recommendation.
I don't think I have necessarily questions with it, more so moving forward on it. I would just want to know a little bit more specifics and details on what the committee would be thinking with those, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mayor. And Commissioner Stonehouse.
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple of quick ones, and as I look at the clock, I realize we're probably not going to be able to work our way through the entire document in the detail we'd like to, so I'm just going to throw a couple things out there. I'm a little surprised that Steph didn't mention this. There's only 1 or 3 things that count in real estate: location, 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 which kind of leads me then to the question that I think should be answered as part of the report, which is really the very basic question, the underpinning of all of it. Why do people want to be in Marquette? Why are they so attracted that they want to stay in Marquette, that they're calling us up and saying, we've got to provide housing for us, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to be in Negaunee. I don't want to be in Ishpeming. I don't want to be in Marquette Township. I want to be in Marquette. And I think we need to answer that basic question, not only for ourselves, so we understand common ground with it, but also so everybody that has a chance to see the report understands that. And I also think a statement should be in there that alludes a little bit to number 1, which is the statement that Mr. Stackowitz made about 50%, in fact, I think it's more than that now, of our property in the city is tax exempt. So we are trying to do a terrific balancing act without nearly what we ought to have for income coming in. And the new commissioners have not yet gone through the audit process when we'll begin to look at where the money's coming from and what the breakdowns are by graph. But you will see that, I'm going to guess here and say 90% of the money we bring into a general fund is strictly by property taxes. Nothing else. Property tax with a little bit coming in then from revenue share. So it is critical that whatever we do with this process and this product, that be providing its fair share of property tax, so the city can continue to do the things that people want to have. For example, the old hospital we all get excited about, but last year that was paying the city $430,000 in property tax. That's about 20% of our general fund budget. That's not something that you can not think very seriously about as we move forward with that. I would also suggest just one last thing, is that we be as honest as we can with our citizens as we go forward with this process. And to include, we do use the word subsidize. We don't hide it with partnership or something like that. We subsidize a lot of things in the city of Marquette. We do it all the time. It's part of what we do for government. There's no shame in saying that we will be subsidizing this given piece of property for this given purpose, whether it be a gift of land or whether it be some other product from the city. And then, of course, we work to facilitate that to maximize the value back to our city and back to our citizens. But thank you, and I will say no more. Oh, great job, committee. Super. I couldn't have done it. I could not have been a member. I would have gone epileptic at some point. But thank you for the great work that you've done.
And Commissioner Bonsall, did you have any questions or comments? I know you're pretty involved in this committee, so you may not. It's up to you.
No, I given our limited time, Madam Mayor, may I ask how much time we had allotted here?
We did not have an end time listed. The start time is 5:15 and there's no end time, and I would like to get through item number 2 tonight as well.
Okay, so let's get through item number 2 then.
I'm hearing an echo. And we don't have to, we don't have to go into a lot of detail on item number 2, but I'd like to, hold on, we've got some serious feedback here. If you're not speaking, if you could please mute your microphone. Thank you. All right, perfect. Oh, all right, so Commissioner Bonzal and City Staff Dennis Stackowitz, if you could maybe run through item number 2, recommendation number 2. If I'm not mistaken, so we've got 3 items. Obviously, we're going to need a lot of discussion on some of these, so I think
Again,
if we could.
I've got
Go ahead,
the
Dennis.
screen share up, Madam Mayor, and I can run through these really quickly. Now, this was the part of the report that talked about reviewing, updating city policies and codes, and this is really dealing with the land development code and zoning. And real quickly, allow accessory dwelling units and duplex units as permitted use. That's in the hands of the Planning Commission. They recently just lessened some restrictions on accessory dwelling units. And they have also addressed number 2 by adjusting the lot size requirements to accommodate duplexes. So number 2 was taken care of, and your last update public hearing you had on that. The relaxing minimum parking requirements for multifamily developments where appropriate. These are things that, again, can be looked at by the Planning Commission. As it stands right now, I believe it's 1 and 1/4 shared space or something like that in certain districts. Creating incentives for developments that maximize the number of units and projects or guarantee a certain number of affordable units. That could be tied in with E, which would be possibly increase height requirements to permit more housing creation. And that would kind of be your trade-off, where if you're going to have some affordable units in here, a market rate missing middle, perhaps you can get an additional story of height to be able to make the dollars and numbers work on it. Because truly, I mean, as Stephanie was a great member and Mark Kern on the committee, they were really good about reminding us that the market dictates things such as cost of lumber and labor cost and things along those lines. So there has to be a little trade-off in allowing to do that. There's also going to be, and I just got a note from Dave Stensis also that the parking requirements were just amended as well. So it's 1 space per 20 units that was just adopted. So that's kind of been addressed. Streamline the permitting process by amending the LDC to permit preliminary site plan review to be binding with conditions. This is probably a complex one for the members here tonight from the City Commission, but essentially what this would allow would be to amend the code so that a developer could go to the Planning Commission ahead of time and get a basic approval for what they want to do without all of the having to spend money on all of the utility details and things along those lines, and then come back to staff later on with all those details and have staff just check the box and be able to do that. So that's another thing that I have to run through the Planning Commission. And then something as simple as adding a suggestion box on the city zoning webpage. These things are all within the bailiwick of administrative staff, and a lot of them have been worked on. As we go through with the committee in the next report that you'll receive, each one of these will be massaged. The big part of number 2 was also the winter parking ban reevaluation. As I had mentioned before, that really would allow for maximization of housing unit development, but it's going to really require a robust process of consultation with Public Works, police department, towing companies, right? The general public. It's a bigger project, but it is referenced in here as a possible solution. So with that, I'm going to cease fire and turn it over to Commissioner Bonzal. And of course, I'm available for questions, and I think I will stop the screen share so everyone can see each other.
Perfect. Thank you, Dennis.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Madam Mayor, I would just say, first of all, I think Dennis did a great job of summarizing everything there. You know, I just want to note that I guess, you know, I've seen a little bit of misinformation circling around out there about what the report actually says, what our recommendations actually are, especially with regards to like zoning and housing density and missing middle housing and parking and things of that nature. That would be the kind of the purview of the Planning Commission and part of the land development code. And I'm really glad we had a chance to have this discussion, and would encourage anybody in the city of Marquette who's curious to actually read the report. As you can see, you know, all of those sorts of recommendations are included in this very short section. And so people can see for themselves whether the information they might have heard is accurate or whether it's perhaps misleading or exaggerated. And then the other thing I would just mention is that with regards to the kind of like the density / like affordability bonus idea with the height requirements, that was something I had mentioned in a previous work session with the Planning Commission, that, you know, didn't really get incorporated into the recent height increase in like the downtown district, for example, but which maybe in the future could be incorporated into that. And I think this would be certainly a very place-specific, very targeted strategy, not something that would be applying to, you know, the vast majority of the city. Just a topic for future discussion by the Planning Commission, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonzo. So I will run through the commissioners. I would say, you know, we're going to go through this section. We'll get through recommendation 3, but we'll try to get through them a little bit more quickly. So focus really on maybe just a couple of specific questions or comments on this section 2. And if you have more to say on that, I would encourage you to maybe write something out to share during our next commission meeting about this experience with this work session, and that would be another good opportunity. And I just want to, you know, in the interest of time, just try to keep things a little bit more brief as we run through. So Commissioner Davis, if you have anything on this recommendation number 2.
Just real quick, any changes or policies that would come before us really, for me, depends on the specifics and where it is in the city that things are being recommended. I think it's real important that we recognize that people buy homes in neighborhoods based on that neighborhood, and there's going to be some real wanting to protect their neighborhood. So again, it just depends on where the land development things are recommended, and that's all I'll say.
Great. And Commissioner Hanley?
All right, just real quickly, looking through this with trying to think, did you guys look at, I know that it's one of our ordinances, but did you look at possibly increasing the amount of unrelated people that are allowed to live together in order to help people from 4 to possibly 6 and maybe even 8, just so that, you know, couples could live together in college and in larger houses? Because I know there's many 5-bedroom houses out there that you can't have 5 unrelated people living in, so they can't rent out properly.
I can answer that from an administrative perspective. We have that provision in the Land Development Code currently, and it falls under, I believe, institutional living community is what we call it. And it's not like a frat house, but it's a definition basically that provides for situations where you have people that are living in such a situation that they can call it an intentional community if it meets those guidelines, and then it can progress in certain locations.
Perfect.
And I wouldn't expect you guys to know that, right? That's the devil in the details buried in that techie data.
All right, and then when it comes to the winter parking ban, I'm assuming that you guys that's super new and you haven't really looked into how you're doing it, but is your plan to look at other cities that have winter parking bans where they do the every other night off-street parking, different sides, things like that? I'm assuming that's something that'll come in the bigger report.
Yeah, I'll let Commissioner Bonzo speak to that.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, it's a good question, Jess, or Commissioner Hanley. Yes, I think that would be our intention, is to look at other communities, but also to consult very closely, because we do have our own unique context, right? This Marquette is one of the snowiest communities in the country. So what works in, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri might not work here. So I think that recognizing that complexity and the unique characteristics of our community will be important. So like to that end, I think that we're absolutely going to need to consult with the Traffic and Parking Advisory Committee, with the Marquette Police Department, and with the Department of Public Works. And also that will be a discussion the Planning Commission will have to be involved with as well, because it will impact the need for minimum off-street parking requirements and things of that nature. So it will be a very gradual and judicious and broad-based discussion. And finally, and most importantly, it will require a great deal of public input and public feedback. So I think that's our intention moving forward. I would love to actually, one idea that I think I had mentioned and that Nina Vandenen from the Traffic and Parking Committee had mentioned during her presentation was, potentially doing a joint work session between the Housing Committee and the Traffic and Parking Advisory Committee at some point, just to kind of have some preliminary discussions about that. And of course, the police department would be able to provide input in such a meeting as well.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
Thank you. I've lived in places that have opposite side of the street parking, and they had it for a very long time. These are places that are really old, that were well developed before we even had cars. So there's truly nowhere to put the snow, and they made it work. So it can be done. These places do get less snow than Marquette does, but they certainly have less places to put it. So it's a matter of figuring out new workflows, which is a matter of, it just takes time. But it is, and I think I appreciate that it was raised. I don't think it's going to be the first thing we go to. It'll be something that comes later and can be understood over time. And so to the point of point A, I think it's important to understand that some of the if we use numbers, say, so we have homes that are, I would assume, 3,000, 4,000 square feet that were built in the 1800s, that today would be the same size as a fourplex. And so you could build fourplexes that look just like a painted lady. I mean, there's no reason, beyond the cost stuff, but like, there's certainly ways, if what people are concerned about is changing the character of the neighborhood, that's absolutely possible to make. Things don't have to be boxes. You can make things look wonderful and have all the environmental energy efficiency and healthy air circulation. There's all kinds of fascinating ways to build things that aren't just barns with floors and hallways. And encouraging RFPs from developers who would be looking at that kind of development would be a way of I would encourage looking at, triple deckers and fourplexes, not just duplexes. That still makes it really hard to pay for a building to get built. I get that. So I think we certainly have homes at that scale in this town. So let's see what we can do to make that happen. I think also code enforcement around has not been mentioned. And I know when I was looking at quote unquote starter homes, they were in pathetic shape. I would not buy them. And I mean, it was appalling, the condition of some of those buildings that I was being shown. And so there's a level of which, and that's what I saw. You can't, I've bought houses in other communities. I've rented in a lot of different communities. And so code enforcement around what is allowed is one part of the puzzle. It's not the only one, but it's part of it. And then the other thing that isn't mentioned here, which is a very challenging topic because people tend to fall on one side or the other of this one. And I wonder where it's going to end up, and that's the short-term rental question. And so this idea that, oh, well, we have to allow short-term rentals because then people can afford to live here. Then people can't afford to live here because we're renting it out to tourists. And so I think it's a very challenging topic. And again, many other communities that are wrestling with it. What we're doing in Marquette is being held up as a model around the state. And I applaud the folks who came up with it. It seems to be working. And I know that people are saying we should have more, but we also are we don't have enough rental right now for the people who want to be here, let alone for our older folks who are going to need living spaces that are smaller. I'm done.
Commissioner Mayer?
Right. I would say I definitely do agree that I think code enforcement should be 100% a part of this conversation, but I will just jump to my thoughts on this one thing real quick here, so I'm not taking too long. One thing that I kind of saw, the duplex aspect of it, I also kind of wondered if maybe we could leave the conversation open for triplexes or fourplexes. I don't know what the committee is thinking on that necessarily, though, or if the other aspect that I just kind of wanted to comment on, the online submission form for how was it phrased? The
zoning webpage, the suggestion box?
The zoning suggestion box idea. I think that's great, and honestly, I don't think it would be probably too hard for city staff to probably add that to the website. Just be, even sooner rather than waiting for this full report. That seems like an easy thing we could add. That in general is always great to have more input on things and how we're doing things. So that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Commissioner Stonehouse?
Yes, ma'am. Just a couple of quick hits. Anybody that hasn't done this, please, especially as a commissioner, ride in a snowplow. I'm sure that the manager can set it up. It's easy enough, but literally you'll get in the snowplow, you go out and you plow snow. And once you do that, you will understand why we have off-street parking requirements and parking bans in the winter. And the same thing with the folks on the ad hoc committee. I'm sure the city can set up for you to take a run with a snowplow, sitting in the cab with the operator when he's plowing snow. And you'll understand in a real world sense why we have a winter parking ban. And it's not something that you can do sitting around an office table. You can't do it in the summer. You can't do it now. Set it up. I'm sure Dennis can take care of it too for you. And it'll be a great experience. Last quick item is if you haven't done it, go down East Ridge Street and you'll see the big mansions. And then in between them, you'll see a house that doesn't fit in. And those were infill houses built in the 60s and 70s because they had so much land that they were allowed to subdivide, build another house next to it. So the city way back then was still doing really what you're advocating now, kind of building out on excess property and providing additional resources. But it's a nice little ride. Take a good look at it. You'll see the same thing, I think, on Arch down a little bit, but primarily on Ridge Street. Field trip authorized. Thank you.
And Commissioner Bonzo, did you have anything you wanted to ask or add a comment? I do have one myself, but I'll wait for you if you have something.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief, but I really appreciated Commissioner Stonehouse's comment right there about Ridge Street because, I think that's actually a really good, Ridge Street is actually a really good example of especially for those who might be a little bit confused or scared or concerned about the impacts that some of the recommended zoning changes in this report might have, take a walk down Ridge Street, or take a drive down Ridge Street and kind of ask yourself, like, is this a neighborhood that I would want to live in? I think most people would say yes. I think it's got I live on the corner of Pine and Ridge in a fourplex. I earn about $10 an hour in my full-time job, plus whatever I earn on the commission. And I'm able to afford to live here along with other people. There have been college students that have lived in my fourplex. There are other young professionals, a retired individual on a limited income. And then my landlords are regular middle-class people, like professors at the university, who made an investment, fixed up this nice historic Victorian home that was in disrepair at the time they purchased it, provide missing middle housing that's affordable for regular people who otherwise, like, if I didn't have this apartment, I don't know how I would afford to live in the city of Marquette. And I think that, as you walk right across the street, you have beautiful, very large Victorian homes that are owned by more affluent folks. And as you walk up and down the street, that kind of beautiful mix of all different kinds of people of different income levels, different types of housing, different price points, that's repeated up and down Ridge Street, East Ridge, West Ridge, as well as surrounding neighborhoods like Pine Street. So I think that's a really great vision of how no neighborhood should be subjected to radical change, and nobody's neighborhood should or will be destroyed by any of the recommendations in this report. But at the same time, I think that given the crisis that we're facing, given many of the facts and the personal stories we've heard tonight, that it would be, I think, pretty unreasonable to say that any neighborhood should be completely and permanently walled off from any change whatsoever, because there are really serious community needs that need to be met. About half the people in Marquette are renters. About a third of them are living in housing that they can't afford. We have like a quarter of the millennial home ownership rate of the country as a whole. And those are the challenges we're dealing with. And those folks are not just young people, not just students, they're also families of kids, seniors, retirees, and limited incomes, and they're our constituents too. So that's just something I think we all need to consider moving forward.
I just had one thing I wanted to, two quick things. So one, any kind of a conversation about changing the winter parking ban, I think is going to be a long process, but I do think if it's something we're considering even a little bit, that some kind of a pilot program would make sense before we go full bore. And I think honestly, we're probably years away from that, in my opinion, based on all the discussions that would need to happen. And I don't think it's something that we should spend a whole lot of time talking about, because I think there are more things we can do based on these preliminary recommendations more quickly to help make change sooner. And that, that might be one piece of the puzzle we can continue to look at, but I don't want us to get waylaid and distracted by that one thing that may be very challenging. But again, just a pilot program may be a fix in a future year, just to check it out in a couple block radius, see how it works. Maybe not, or maybe some kind of a parking study. The other thing I wanted to mention, I love the idea of the suggestion box on the city zoning webpage. I also think, maybe some kind of a refresh on customer service for people who are reaching out with zoning questions and concerns, especially kind of, when people come with unique challenges, maybe we find ways to help them that might be outside of the box thinking, and that would be really encouraged at the city level. I don't know how we get there, whether that's through talking with other cities to see what they do, whether that's training, whether that's refocusing our website to be more customer or citizen friendly. But I think that there is a way there to help people see options that they don't necessarily know are even out there. I'm trying to remember the example that just came up. Someone had said you could just apply for some kind of a use permit, but unless you know to ask that question, if you just get denied for something, or if you if you look on the website and you can't figure it out and you don't even bother trying, that's going to prohibit a lot of the creative thinking that I think could help with some of these middle housing problems and probably some other issues as well. So that's a big issue. I don't know how to tackle it, but I think it could be somehow weaved into this part of the report here. Okay, with that, we are going to address the third and final section of recommendations here. And, you know, looking at it, I think it's probably a little bit more of an overview. And then I would ask each commissioner just to have only one or two final comments or questions. And then if the ad hoc committee has any final comments or questions for this meeting, and then we will wrap things up.
Okay, real quickly, this section is on seeking partnerships, meaning that the city recognizes that we are not alone, and there are partners available within the city, within the county, within the state of Michigan, and at the federal level, to where there could be potential partnerships. And some of those identified were the Marquette County Land Bank. And just a quick example here, if you recall, at one point in time, the city, I think Commissioner Stonehouse would remember this. I think you were around for this one. We worked with the land bank on some property across from Snowberry, and were able to turn that into a couple of affordable housing units. So those opportunities are out there, as well as working with MISHDA. We have the Brownfield Redevelopment Finance Authority. The Brownfield, and there are commissioners on the city commission now that have experience on the Brownfield. I think some of them were the folks that helped author the affordable and workforce housing development as a priority for the Brownfield. So the MBRA is a mechanism that has alternative financing mechanisms that can provide financing for closing the gaps on projects. The Board of Light and Power, the committee has not reached out to them yet, so that would be something to do in the future, but they do have large land holdings that could potentially be available for development, as long as those land holdings aren't currently being used for that wonderful recreation purpose that folks actually moved to Marquette for. The MEDC, or Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the DDA has historically been very successful getting some grant funding for upper story renovation for apartments. The Marquette Housing Commission, there are a lot of challenges that are presented with the low-income housing because of federal programs and whatnot. Also public-private partnerships to develop some missing middle housing, maybe perhaps through the Brownfield Authority. And, you know, the big one here that stands out for me as an administrator in my position is promoting the economic development that's going to provide the better paying jobs in the city of Marquette. And that, you know, that comes through maintaining partnerships with local and state economic development agencies and ensuring that our codes are in place and we have that redevelopment ready community designation, and we keep reaching out for that. And then also the committee recognized that, you know, part of the homelessness issue actually comes from working with the Marquette Alger Local Planning Board as well on those issues. So with that, after my summary, I'm going to turn it back over to Chairman Bonsall and stop the screen share on this.
Thank you, Dennis. And I do apologize if there were any moments tonight where my microphone was cutting out a little bit. I think somebody just made me aware that might have been a problem, but I really appreciate your summary of that, Dennis. And I don't have much more to say about this other than that the city can't act alone, right? We need to work with the private sector, work with other public sector entities like those that are listed here to try and pool our resources and create new opportunities. And I think we'll be much more successful if we do that.
Excellent. So I will just run through each other commissioner. I think Commissioner Bonsall, you probably have summarized your comments, so I'll go through the rest and then we'll open it up to the rest of the ad hoc committee if anyone had any final things to add here. So Commissioner Davis.
Yes, all of those potential partners. Yeah, this is such a complex issue, and it requires interventions from multiple angles. I like the idea of working with the economic development so that we can bring some of the wages and salaries to a livable way. What I didn't see here are things like NMU and Habitat for Humanity to help people rehab houses that are distressed, because maybe if they had those skills, they would be willing to take some of those homes that Commissioner Hill was talking about. And also perhaps some banks. You know, Stephanie Jones talked about how mobile homes are difficult to purchase because of the higher interest rates and not being able to get loans from banks. So maybe we need to also partner with banks. And that's it.
Great. And how about Commissioner Hanley?
Heather, I'll keep this very brief. I really like the idea of working with all these different things. I think there's a lot of things that we can touch on better, knowing a little bit more about who we were going to work with later. But I think that's all things that I could see being addressed later. But these look great. I love that we want to look at working on promoting the economy as well. But I don't know exactly what the plan was, one of that, or if you have ideas on where you're going to go with that, with the economy stuff. But I assume that's stuff that'll be touched on later.
Okay, great. Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
I had, because we're going to get final comments, right, after this?
Nope, this is it.
Oh, okay. So one overall recommendation, could we please have the presentations that were given to the committee made available to the public so that all of us can understand what was presented to the committee? It sounds like they were very rich and interesting. And so can they be put in the housing committee part of the website? And I actually have them now up to 10 things, which I'm not going to say out loud, but I'm going to be sending an email with questions and ideas. And I also look forward to the next meeting so that we can continue to flesh this out. This has been a really productive conversation. I, again, greatly appreciate the time of the committee, especially the folks who have sat there and not said a word tonight. I'd be happy to talk to you more in the future. If there's things I've said that you thought I was off base or I was on target, I'd love to hear from you. And thank you as we delve into this very difficult, challenging topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mayer.
I just want to again thank the committee for all of the work on this and bringing this to us. And I really did appreciate all of the conversations that we've all been having tonight. I'm very optimistic moving forward, looking at all these things. And I also want to emphasize that the partnership, both with public and private, and the different aspects, even with that, whether it be partnering with the state as well on the public side of things, you know, it's going to take all those partnerships to actually make these tangible. And I think this is a really good first step in trying to look at and pursuing that process. Again, just want to thank the committee and Commissioner Bonzel for your leadership on the committee and kind of advocating for its creation to begin with. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Stonehouse.
Yes, Your Honor. Great meeting, good exchange of information, super job by both the ad hoc committee and the folks from QPAD. Really appreciate that data and all your good work. And I do look forward to continuing to push this marble down the highway and making it all work. Interesting to see what the BLP will say. I don't know if you've spoken with them yet or not, but that could be the real star if you can pull that one in, because I think we've got a greater opportunity for space, land, and a better place maybe to do this. Without even knowing it, I think that's really can be the gem. Comment on Brownfield, I'd like to see where the money is coming from Brownfield. I mean, they don't print money up there. You know, they really don't do that. So in some way, they're earning money from something. And if it's a bond that they're putting out to pay for the project, then the city of Marquette usually ends up, not usually, always ends up being in effect, the co-signer of that bond. And we are approaching the end, I think, of our bonding limit when you get with the auditors. So there's not a lot of money in the slush to do those kinds of things. And it still would represent tax money in some form. So we need to be very conscious that it's not a printing machine for money. Though it could be a mechanism that might make all this work. And please continue as you work this report to push in any way you can the concept of economic development and the overriding criticality that really is the linchpin that all of this will float on. So thank you.
Thanks. I think we've made it through the commission. I have some just brief wrap-up comments, nothing specifically addressing recommendation number 3, other than absolutely all the partnerships. I think that you all have done a nice job putting that together. So I will open it up if any of the ad hoc committee members wanted to make a statement or say anything at this point. You have a chance to do so. Just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you. If not, that's totally fine too. Just wanted to give you a chance to do that. We certainly appreciate you being here. I'm not seeing any hands. Is my computer frozen or, wait, I saw one. There's Antonio. Go ahead, Antonio.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here tonight and for listening to this wonderful report put together by the committee. This is a topic that I think is very relevant and pressing at the same time. I look at this as twofold. Immediate needs. I think a lot of that needs assessment report and data that's been provided tonight by the presentation with Callie and Ryan is very important for us to supplement these reports as we go. So what is needed, I think, in the city of Marquette is very important. And I think a lot of the comments tonight from the public, I think, would substantiate an additional need for data and perhaps in the form of a survey or something that needs to happen sooner rather than later. The pandemic, I think, is throwing everybody is impacting people differently. Loss of jobs, unemployment, things of that nature. I think that's where the city could help in making sure that those partnerships are established, being a conduit for things like policy reform and maybe even some of the ideas that we've brought together today. So I look forward to working more with the committee to finding out what those needs are, where the data would come from, potentially to substantiate some of that, and looking forward to the public comments and feedback that we would get in the next year, really. And looking into the future, I was really happy that Commissioner Stonehouse said that everybody wants to be in Marquette. If you look at the population trends from Marquette from the decades of the 80s onward, Marquette had more people in 1980 than it did in 2010, 2020. So clearly we're not going up in population. So everybody wants to be here, but yet, I do want to say that we need to act like we want to have people stay here. So that's another important topic for me, is making sure that all this talent and retention and all these conversations about growth really substantiate to making sure that those available options are there for the city and for city residents, really. So thank you everyone for tonight's comments as well.
Commissioner Stonehouse, I see you have a rebuttal.
Antonio, I don't have a rebuttal. In 1980, we had K.I. Sawyer with literally thousands of airmen and their families out there. When that closed in 91, the county took a massive hit in terms of population. And Evan, you might know what it is. I'm going to say, I think 7,000 or so left the county. And that's where you saw that dip in 80 and years following. So really, we fought our way back up to begin to think about where we used to be. So you got to give us a freebie on that one.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Stonehouse, I do think you're right. It was about 7,000 people that we lost in the county. And we did kind of gradually recover. Although, at least according to the American Community Survey data, our population has kind of stagnated since the 2010 census. It'll be interesting to see, and housing affordability or lack thereof may be a part of that. So it'll be interesting to see what the 2020 census data holds.
It will be fascinating. Housing, jobs, all of that ties in together. Now, again, sorry to prolong it, Your Honor.
No worries. And Commissioner Mayer, did you have something? I saw your hand.
I just wanted to add, right around that same time, I believe when the Kinchelo Air Base on the east side closed, just because I was talking about the Sioux earlier and comparing with Marquette, I believe they lost about 3,000 or 4,000 residents right around the same time as well. And I don't think it had recovered since then either.
Interesting. Thank you. Other committee members, ad hoc committee members, any comments or statements here? I'm just looking for any show of hands. Don't have to if you don't want to. Just wanted to make sure you had a chance. I'm not seeing any, so I will go ahead and get things wrapped up here. We'll have a public comment and then we will adjourn. So I just wanted to add that I understand it's a really complex issue. It's going to take a lot of time for us to figure out this missing middle housing affordability, and the definitions will likely change between now and when we figure it out. And when we figure it out, I'm sure we'll still be working on solutions because our problems will be new. But this is a first step in a long process. I'm proud of the fact that this committee has been formed. I'm proud of the work that you all have done. Thank you. A tremendous thank you for taking this first step with us and helping us get there. I'm a big fan of progress over perfection. My Grandpa Joe always used to say, do something even if it's wrong. And while maybe I don't believe that 100%, just get started, get going, see what questions you have, what partnerships you can form, what ideas come up as part of the conversations, because if you don't start and you don't have the conversations, then none of it is possible. So I certainly appreciate what all of you are doing, commissioners and ad hoc committee members, staff members alike, to get this off the ground. And I know it's going to take a while, but I'm looking forward to more conversation and discussion on this topic in the months and years ahead. So I'm sure we'll be having, I guess it would be my intent that we'd be having another work session after your final report, whenever that comes out, I think maybe sometime in the summer. And we will be talking with you again soon. Thank you all, and we will open it up for public comment now. Do we have anyone for public comment? We have one on the phone or on Zoom. I'm sure we'll be having, I guess it was my intent that we'd be having another work session here. So someone has a report whenever that comes out, I think maybe sometime in the summer. And we will be talking with you again soon. So whoever called in for public comment, if you could turn off the YouTube recording, because we can all, it's a 20-second delay and that's what we're all hearing right now. It took me a minute to process
Okay, I
what's going on.
can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, is this Margaret? I think I recognize your voice.
Yes, this is Margaret Brum, and I was waiting to be called on. I sorry about my iPad, but I had it all ready to shut off.
So Margaret,
I know about that.
Go ahead. Margaret, go ahead and state your full name and physical address, and then you've got 3 minutes. I'll let you know when that's up. Go ahead.
Margaret Brum, 404 East Magnetic Street, Marquette, Michigan. I have several items in no particular order. Anybody who listened to this entire meeting and watched it knows how much time and effort has been put in already. And whatever comes out of this, they'll build on what you've done today. So I would really, as somebody's already asked for this, but I'd really appreciate it if that CUPAD report could be posted on the city website, because I looked for it while it was being presented and it's not there yet. So again, I really would appreciate if that was posted. Number two, echoing Commissioner Stonehouse and several others, for any people, and I'm just going to give you, from the audience point of view, there were several hand waves about it's going to be possible to change the on-street parking ban. We're going to have a 12-inch snow event between tomorrow and Friday. I think those 2 days would be great days for you to hop aboard a city plow and talk to the city plowers about their ideas about how to handle this, because I could talk to you till I'm blue in the face, and so could someone else, but until you've ridden with a plow driver, you don't appreciate what is possible and what is just not a good idea. And number three, one of the things missing, and I hope to hear from it the next time, is the idea that when you have your new developers, is that you give them a deal of some sort if they provide for every unit of very expensive housing, if they can show to the commission they provided 4 units of least expensive housing, they get some sort of deal. Because the only way I see that you're going to get least expensive housing is if you put it in the developer's best interest to provide it. Anyway, I hope I didn't go over 3 minutes. Thank you. I look forward to your next meeting. And like I said, call the city garage tonight. I'm sure they'll hook you up with a plow driver. First, they start their shifts at about 4 a.m., so be ready. Thanks, bye.
Thank you, Margaret, and I would echo that request for that QPAD report, that QPAD presentation. I think if it's possible for us to get a copy of that and for us to post that on the city website, I see no reason why we couldn't do that as long as QPAD is willing to share it. I think that is all we have for this evening, so I will go ahead and adjourn. We are now adjourned at 7:30 p.m. and we'll see you next time.